Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday, April 6th, 2020. We're going to declare today an additional International Talk Like a Pirate Day. I guess we can go ahead and do that. I forget exactly. I always forget every year when that's coming up. I'm always pleasantly surprised when it dawns on us in the morning that it is Talk Like a Pirate Day. I never know what day it is. There's no way of me for remembering it. There's no mnemonic device that can make it work, but and there's no mnemonic device that can make this one work either, I don't think. But as we have often noted, every day is really Talk Like a Pirate Day. And now that the United States is acting as pirates around the world, I guess we can make every day Talk Like a Pirate Day. Orangebeard the Pirate, Donald Trump, pulling some new and interesting stunts to clear up a lot of problems that he's got. None of the problems we have are going to be solved by this, but it's been an interesting weekend watching things develop. As Trump was doing from early days, blaming the states for not already having put in place stockpiles of PPE, ventilators, etc., all the equipment that might be necessary to combat the coronavirus infections. And in so doing, I think standing 200 years of federalism on its head, maybe not 200 years, but certainly the modern era of federalism since World War II on its head. And somehow convincing Jonathan Turley along the way. I don't know what kind of hold he's got over Jonathan Turley, but he sort of covered himself in glory during the impeachment hearings and has continued on his merry way now, deciding that I guess it's his opinion that this is the way that federalism is supposed to work, and that federalism did in fact contemplate the president deciding which states should get emergency relief and in what order based on their personal relationship with the governors of those states and the personalities of those governors and maybe even the political party of those governors. Somehow, I guess this meets with Jonathan Turley's approval, although I'm sure he would deny it and love to clarify things. That's the way the reading comes out. But that's only step one. So Trump has been blaming the governors for not preparing. Meanwhile, of course, the federal government has been ill-prepared. But again, Trump's excuse for the ill preparation of the federal government was that it wasn't really federal responsibility and states ought to have been stockpiling, and that they ought to now seek to buy their own PPE, ventilators, etc. on the world market and not to look to the federal government to do it. In the meantime, so that, of course, puts states in competition with one another under the best of circumstances. We would have to look at this, economically and say, all right, now states have to bid against one another, and that's not a good thing. That's why the federal government is supposed to be responsible for these things. But it could work itself out on poorly in an open market, but we don't have one of those either, because as it turns out, Trump, I guess, is sensitive to the sting of having left the federal government unprepared and is trying to catch up and prepare the federal government after all, and in so doing is now jumped into the game as a competitor against the states with considerably more buying power, plus more power to simply direct that they be the winning bidder, whether their bid is higher than the state's bids or not. They are now seizing shipments, but under what authority, I'm not entirely sure, but seizing shipments that are bound for the states that followed his directive to prepare themselves and build their own stockpiles. He now, in an attempt to play catch-up for the federal government, is stealing those shipments. And worse still, we're now finding out that a lot of those shipments are being bought and sold and resold and who knows, maybe even seized by private actors in all of this. There are private contractors working as middlemen. This is something we discovered early in last week when we found out about the Republican fundraising operative who inexplicably quit his decades-long job, switched careers on a dime, and told all his clients, yeah, I'm going into the business of supplying PPE, etc., to the states. Oh, I see we have a problem with our Skype here, and it's going to take us a minute to reset all of this stuff, and poor Greg's call isn't coming through. Let's see if we can't fix this up. Why is Skype not registering on the big computer? I don't know. Let's see. That's too bad, to say the very least. Let's see. All of this seems to be working, but why wouldn't this be? Let's see. We'll turn it off and on again and see if that does anything. And maybe we'll call Greg and see if that can be arranged. All right. Switching over to the big computer to try and drive these things. Oh, hang on. We'll try calling him. There we go. Perhaps this will work. Although he's in the middle of calling me, but maybe it'll give you one of those signals that say you've got an incoming call on another line, and you should just switch over. No, I guess not. All right. Well, let me see. I'll have to signal him to await my call instead. I'll try calling you, Greg. Let's see. Is that working? Well, right now it says Greg isn't online, but now I see the moving. Let's see. The moving signal. We'll see one more time whether we can make this work. My computer's fighting me bitterly. All right. Let's see. How's that? Hi,
Good
Greg.
morning.
Okay. Good morning. I don't know why my the big show computer didn't really want to recognize Skype for some reason. Maybe my signal has been stolen by Orangebeard the pirate.
Yeah, maybe it's got a virus. So that's September 19th, Talk Like a Pirate Day.
Okay, thank you. I don't know how.
I don't know how you can forget that. All right.
I don't know. Have I forgotten that? Is that what happened?
You said you can never remember. There's no mnemonics.
What?
Right?
I said that? Are you talking about?
You did.
What? When?
Yeah, during your press conference with Anthony Fauci yesterday.
Yeah. Maybe
when you told all your advisors to forget about
president.
Fauci, listen to Oz.
Yeah. Or Peter Navarro, for that matter.
As somebody pointed out, just because you spend 52 years of your life working to be the world's expert on something doesn't mean that somebody should listen to you on that particular subject.
I don't see any reason why.
I mean, what does he know about the,
He's not from Central Casting.
What does he know about the Final Four, brackets?
Right, which we should be
Obviously,
in,
he's not an expert, so why should you listen to him?
I cannot think of any idea. He doesn't match the Central Casting look of a doctor in command, and so he's out.
I know, and besides, he doesn't always wear a white coat. But the funny thing is that even Vinny from the Bronx, first time, long time, is not really in tune with what Trump is doing these days.
No, I guess not. And, well, he's not a Pirates fan, Vinny from the Bronx, obviously.
No, obviously not. So there's this new polling stuff from Florida.
Yes.
UNF, you'd think that Florida's kind of an important swing state, but there's a lot of old people in Florida, and they're worried about getting sick. And so it has Biden 46, Trump 40.
Oh, all right.
Trust Trump to give reliable coronavirus information. 41% say yes, and 58% say no. That's a minus 17. They're better off with DeSantis, the governor, 55-41, which isn't all that great, but better, like most governors, better than Trump.
Yeah.
And Trump's approve on coronavirus is 45-53, minus 8. DeSantis has a plus 5 on that. And Fauci has a plus 79. Why didn't you listen to the guy who's plus 79? Oh, no. You can't let him speak. He might contradict Trump. That's what happened during the press conference yesterday.
Yes.
The joke of a press conference, which Trump spent an hour and a half saying literally nothing.
Another one.
It was worse than a Seinfeld show.
Yeah, he wasn't supposed to even have one yesterday.
Well, but he heard Biden was having one at 7 o'clock, so he decided to have one at 7 o'clock.
Hey, what do you know? And I guess it worked, because didn't anyone watch Biden?
Probably not, because you had to be on Facebook or on the Internet to do that, whereas this was broadcast by everybody. But, he made a complete buffoon of himself, as he often does, and just got really mad when people started challenging him about, what are you talking about with this drug that you're pushing here and why you're pushing
yes.
it. There's stories in the papers about how Rudy Giuliani's pushing it, and
yes.
People don't really understand what he's doing and why he's doing it. And by the way, the evidence for it working isn't all that great.
No, in fact, I understand from Twitter, which may be wrong, that Sweden has called a halt to its trials over the side effects.
But hey, Trump knows everything. Just ask him.
Yeah, right. And
I'm not
he
a
likes
doctor,
Finland
and they should have
better
stopped
anyway.
there. That should be the only clip that Trump press conferences give you.
Yes.
And then the part about him trying to shut Fauci up.
Okay. There's also a theory circulating finally about, what's the financial connection? Apparently, it's Novartis is the, I guess, one company that's big in it. And
there's always going to be one.
Yes,
because,
that's
you've
not hard
got
to
enough
find.
invested
We don't know
everywhere.
if
You can
that's
always
it.
find something. But let me give you an idea of how the media is kind of turning on him. This is from the Pundit Roundup this morning. Scope of Trump's unpreparedness is sinking in. Let me just give you some 3 Washington Post headlines just from yesterday. The U.S. was beset by denial and dysfunction as the coronavirus raged. It was 70 days before they did anything. Then Dan Baltz with his political analysis. America was unprepared for a major crisis again.
What?
Political Reckoning, the first in a series exploring the political dynamics surrounding the coronavirus crisis. See that Florida poll I just told you. And then Washington Post again. Inside the coronavirus testing failure, alarm and dismay among the scientists who sought to help. Right? Meanwhile, Tony Fauci is saying this is going to be a bad week. Things are going to get bad. We need to be prepared for that. It's going to be shocking to some. There's going to be a lot of deaths this week. So people do have to be prepared for it. Here's Frank Bruni writing, has anyone found Trump's soul? Anyone? Bueller? Anyone? He's not rising to the challenge of the coronavirus pandemic. He's shriveling into nothingness. Then there's Maggie Haberman writing, confirming Jonathan Swan's great reporting in here about yesterday's task force tensions. The president wasn't supposed to do a briefing, but he told several advisors they're free TV and high ratings for him. So why the hell are you covering them?
I don't know.
Why cover them live? That's ridiculous. Now, here's more. Trump media response to Trump.
Yes.
Aaron Rupert thinks that this CNN chyron belongs in the first ballot Hall of Fame. It says, breaking news, Trump on unproven drug. What do you have to lose? President of AMA, you could lose your life.
Yeah, well, that's one.
That's pretty good.
Yes. Sweden
Right,
says...
here's AP. President Trump is pitching a medicine for COVID-19 sufferers that is yet to be determined effective or safe for the virus. His advocacy of the malaria drug hydroxychloroquine runs counter to what his own health experts say. That's a nice way to put it in the tweet.
Very nice and very formal,
Right. It's like Yamiche Alcindor is like a master of this. Trump said X, yet the truth is Y. And that's often how she tweets it. And that's pretty good. It's not quite a truth sandwich, but it's not bad. And that's really how you should do it if you're going to cover it at all.
Okay.
Now, here's a fascinating one for you historian buffs. Okay.
Not
and
historians,
this is one.
Yeah.
You can be a history buff or a historian buff.
Into historians.
Yeah, well, if you like the historians. I'm going to give you this one because, I think this probably needs a lot more debate than I'm going to give it.
Oh.
But the title of it from Politico magazine over the weekend was Spin Won't Save Trump.
Yes, it will.
History shows us. No, it won't.
There's the debate.
That's not an argument.
All right.
Argument clinic is over there. History shows us that theatrical press briefings can't disguise bad policy. And no, it can't. And you know who it references? Not Monty Python. It references Herbert Hoover.
All right.
The Herbert Hoover references are beginning.
Terrific.
Okay.
And
the Trump bill, mass death, put them in his golf courses movement has begun.
All right.
A case in point is President Herbert Hoover. And everybody wrote in and said, that's really being disrespectful to Hoover.
Yes, right.
Well, it probably is, but that gives you an idea what's going on here. A case in point is President Herbert Hoover. Because of his stupendously inept response to the Great Depression, Hoover, and I love that there's a Hoover Institute, Hoover is usually remembered as a terrible communicator who lacked the compassion, warmth, and ability to speak to ordinary Americans that characterized the successor Franklin Roosevelt. Or if you grew up in New York, Roosevelt.
Oh.
But early in his career, Hoover was widely deemed to be anything but inept. He was judged a veritable wizard with the new arts of what was often called publicity.
Oh, is that right?
Walter Lippmann, the leading pundit of the day, wrote at the time, Mr. Hoover's ascent to the presidency was planned with great care and assisted throughout by a high-powered propaganda of the latest model. Drew Pearson, another leading columnist, also branded Hoover one of the great super promoters of the age, a man who had been able by a consummate sense of publicity to create the illusion of heroism and greatness and to attain world acclaim.
Oh.
Which in good part rested on Hoover's skills at working the news media as Commerce Secretary in the 20s under Harding and Coolidge. During the 27 Mississippi flood, probably the worst natural disaster in American history until Hurricane Katrina, Coolidge allowed Hoover to take the reins, even though the president was mostly averse to federal government intervention. The Commerce Secretary set up headquarters in Memphis, traveled up and down the river valley for 3 months, winning headlines and fawning reviews. The New York Times Magazine,
never heard of it.
Probably Maggie Haberman's grandmother, probably, hailed his genius, and National Geographic ran a spread about his heroics, adorned with dozens of photographs of Hoover tending to the men, women, and children who were displaced or otherwise affected by the flood.
That's what I remember.
Remember that?
Yeah.
A pioneer in radio, Hoover broadcast his speeches over national networks, staging them so his audiences around the country could hear the rushing river in the background, conjuring images of Hoover standing tall amid the crisis.
Glub, glub, glub.
He also did well with films. Another gambit the president tried was to establish his own 12-page weekly newspaper, essentially a propaganda organ, that ran all sorts of pieces praising the president. And then he enlisted the leading advertising and public relations experts of his time. He also created an emergency committee for employment and appointed the celebrated public relations expert Edward Bernays, a man who, as a rule, believed no problem was impervious to a PR man's wiles. Sound familiar?
Well, not with respect to Herbert Hoover, but sure.
Otherwise, as Sophocles supposedly said, a lie never lives to be old. Politicians may be able in the short term to cover up their failed programs or weak leadership with clever messaging and images, but typically over time, see Katrina, the effects of their actions make themselves felt on the general public, see Iraq, who generally can tell when a policy isn't working. Hoover, see Nixon. Hoover discovered this, and whatever the outcome in November's election, Trump eventually will as well. If the poll numbers are any indication, the public may be on to the president's spin already. It's a great article. It's a good comparison.
I will read
and
that
I said last week, even before reading this, you know what? It's about time people started reading up on Herbert Hoover, because you're going to start hearing these references.
Yes.
And guess what? There it is.
Okay. Well, we've had a lot of that over the weekend. I tell you, my own, I haven't done a lot of reading on Herbert Hoover.
It's time.
Yeah,
it's
the
time
gloss that he's gotten was, well, okay, obviously the Great Depression is kind of how we remember it. And then I thought...
from Annie.
Right.
And they refined.
Yes, they absolutely did. And I thought, at the time, the counter spin, even then, well, yes, Great Depression, but, he had one great acclaim for his relief efforts. The ones I heard about were the post-World War I relief in Europe, and that, well, okay, he was a well-meaning, if inept, kind of guy, and as it turns out, there's even more to that. Wow. So, okay, revelation after revelation.
Hey, that's why I'm on the show, to bring you the stuff that I didn't know. I just read it, so now I'm an expert.
Yeah, that's enough for us, right?
That's enough for us, right?
No, it isn't.
Okay, so what do we have here? We have, do you approve or disapprove of the job Donald Trump is doing as president? 41 approve, 53 disapprove, and 41 approve is not all that high. That is the MSN tracker poll, the one which incredibly briefly and for a tiny little bit apparently had a bump or a blip of approval, which is now pretty much gone, and I thought I'd give you that this morning.
Thank you. There it is.
So I'm pretty much ignoring 538 and Real Clear Politics for the moment. As they, because a lot of these formal media polls are about a week late when they come in. So they still show Trump with his incredibly small bump, pimple, whatever you want to call it, molehill. But the trackers, on the other hand, are showing something a little bit different here. For example, Daily Kos uses Civics. And Civics currently has job approval at net 11, minus 11. Which is not all that good, by the way.
Okay, yes.
Coronavirus outbreak concern is up to a net plus 53.
Coronavirus
And
polling
opinion
better.
of the government response is a minus 12.
Okay.
Right. So none of those are particularly good for Trump, and the idea that he's doing fine in the polling is simply not true.
That's Peter Navarro calling to say it is true. So we can have him on the air, certainly. But we'll wait for him to get lost or for somebody else to take the call, I guess. Okay. Well, we have our image anyway. Are you back on?
Now I'm back.
Yes. Okay. Excellent.
It's a four
Here's the
for
seal.
those of you who listen frequently. It's a 4-ring answering
Yes.
machine. I should
Oh,
probably
yeah.
set it to 3.
Oh, yeah.
But
Not
there
now.
it is. So I don't know who it is, but usually it's the DNC asking for money this time of day.
Oh, well, let's answer.
They also call it 11, 3, 7, and midnight. And, it gets very annoying. Apparently, somebody
We're
told
used
them
to it.
I was an ATM, and so they think it's a good idea to keep calling me as if I'm going to pick up the phone.
Okay.
Why are they calling me from Washington? It's not because they want my advice on the pandemic. I promise you that.
You have another line for that.
I have another line for that.
Okay.
So let's look at Donald Trump's job approval among independents, because that's always fun.
Yes.
Oh, looky here. When he had his, oh my gosh, he's taking it seriously, look at his tone improvement. It was only 45 approve and 51% disapprove, but now it's 43-53, minus 10 within independents. And so that's really the ball game there, because Republicans are going to love him. Democrats are going to hate him. We always knew this. We will look to see if there's absolutely any whatsoever deterioration in the Republican support for him. But that's not really what we're looking for. What we're looking for and what we're looking at is what the indies do. And that's what this is. And I think that's, the one that's really worth paying attention to. We can look at any subset you want to. If we did look at Republicans, for example, do we see any change at all? No, it's 90%. It's always been 90%. It's going to stay at 90%. Except during the time he was really screwing up, it improved to 91%. So he had that huge rally.
Okay. Yeah, all right. Well, so no movement there. I mean, the percentage will stay the same. It's just now a question of how many of them will be alive in November.
Yeah, well, he's trying to kill off his demographic, which is pretty cool. So, I don't know why they think that's a good idea, but they do. Let's give you some more MSN numbers because, again, it's not the absolute amount, but it's the trend that I think is just so interesting. For example, Wisconsin polling, if the election were held today, would you vote for Trump or Biden? And before I get into the individual states, I'm just going to send David the URL where I'm doing this from. So later on, when you look at the summary that Scott Anderson puts together, then you can play along.
Okay.
But Wisconsin right now is Trump 43, Biden 49. So how is this playing out? Well, the most recent Wisconsin MU law poll, the gold standard there, had a Biden +3, so that's not surprising. Remember, we just gave you those Florida results.
Yes.
Okay, where Biden is leading in Florida by 46-40. So this poll has Florida 41-50. Again, the amounts are probably exaggerated a little bit, but the trends are just interesting. North Carolina is Trump 42, Biden 50. These are swing states, mind you. And everybody once in a while brings up, hey, Minnesota, they're going to make a play for Minnesota. Minnesota is Trump 40, Biden. Michigan is Trump 40, Biden 50. And Minnesota is Trump 36, Biden 55. So I'm really not thinking Minnesota is going to be in play. New Hampshire is Trump 44, Biden 50. Maine is Trump 38, Biden 55. The whole Northeast is solidly blue. North Carolina, Trump 42, Biden 50. Arizona, Trump 44, Biden 47. Texas, Trump 45, Biden 44. Just to give you an idea of the scope of all of this. Louisiana, Trump 47, Biden 45. So he's doing pretty poorly in this particular poll. And, even Ohio is Trump 45, Biden 46 in this particular poll.
All right. Yeah.
Right? Iowa, Trump 44, Biden 48. Again, it's not that these are predictive of what's going to happen in the fall.
Okay,
but,
true.
The trends have been against Trump in all of these states. And there's no question that this coronavirus plus the Great Depression combo is really not going to do well. Trump is not performing well. And all the blather about, well, this might help him because, it just might work. It's just nonsense. The more exposure he gets on television, the worse he does. Now, Navigator polling, which is another tracker that looks at his response, won't be out the next version of it till tomorrow morning. They take Sunday, Monday off.
Okay.
So they have a Saturday update and then they have a Tuesday update, which I didn't know last week. They didn't tell us. So it was like, I'm refreshing Sunday. I don't see anything. I'm refreshing Monday. I don't see anything. But we will expect stuff for tomorrow. But the most recent one that they had over the weekend was especially unfavorable to Trump. So I'm going to give you those because it's the most recent ones we have. They're 2 days old, so they're not fresh, but they're not stale, if you will.
I see. So they're 50% off.
So 50% off, right? Day old bread. Key takeaways: Trump's early missteps remain problematic to the public, and concern over them is only growing. Lack of preparedness remains the biggest concern. Despite a popular narrative, Trump has not experienced a sustained approval bump, especially in comparison to other governors and leaders. 40%, let me read this to you again, 40% of 2016 Trump voters say the president did not take coronavirus seriously enough in the crisis, up 17 points since early last week.
Well, dramatic response to that with music.
66 of independents, 66% of Americans overall say the same, which is why we always follow the indies. And 53% of Trump voters say Trump got it right initially, down 7 points. 1% say he overreacted. We'll talk about that after the break.
Okay. Well, they drank their fish tank to protect themselves, and so they're
they all live in Georgia with Bryan County.
Yeah, or they're covered in Jesus' blood. Is that other
Tate
one?
Reed. Well, they live in Mississippi.
Oh, okay. Well, we pulled there too. We'll be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to Patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support.
Open up those 3 images, or you can do that in the tweet.
Or we can do it right now as we welcome everybody back to the show here, back to the Kagro in the Morning show here on Netroots Radio, and our chatter in the background getting ready for Greg's comparison, as between other
here's Axios,
upstanding
for example.
media sites. Oh, well, Axios.
Yeah,
okay.
Axios. Healthcare workers with loved ones of their own keep showing up at hospitals across the country, knowing that more Americans than they can possibly care for are depending on them.
Yes.
Going to work has become a form of personal sacrifices. Some of the healthcare workers actually have to live in hotels and leave their families behind when they do this. And that's amongst between the fear of not having enough materials to do this properly.
Yeah.
Here's Jim Roberts, New York City Jim, tweeting, coronavirus doctors face the most awful choice, who will live and who will die. So you get a sense of the gravity and the importance of this. And so the Hill, in its infinite wisdom, decided to pick out the most important aspect of the entire coronavirus situation. And they tweet, Democrats struggle to keep up with Trump messaging on coronavirus.
Oh, yeah. Okay. There's not even any PPE in these pictures at all.
Well, firstly, it's not true.
Oh, well. Nah,
I mean, start with that. And secondly, what a dumb thing to highlight.
Versus
Trump is sinking in the polls and Democrats are struggling with messaging. I mean, this is just typically everything that political reporting does wrong, and they haven't adjusted one whit, one iota during this pandemic. Is just remarkable.
No. Where are they physically? Have Schumer and Pelosi left Washington and gone home? I don't
know, but in this picture, they're not in the same
these are file photos,
place. They're obviously practicing social distancing here.
Yeah, well, I think
they're not standing next to each other.
Yes, those two, although there are people standing next to them. But again, I think these are just...
Yeah, but those are little people.
File photos. They don't count, I guess.
They don't count.
Okay.
They're staffers.
Yeah,
right?
well, they had to dig deep even for pictures to illustrate.
Or even worse, they're reporters.
Tweets. Yeah. They don't count at all, right?
They don't count at all, right? But actually, they are somewhat distanced. Even in those pictures, they're not crowding. They're not doing as they like to call it, a scrum.
No. I don't think those are pictures of what's happening now anyway. But okay, yeah, I mean, dramatic photos and headlines everywhere else but The Hill playing its usual game. I mean, it is a trade paper. That's the best way to...
Right. So this morning, but even if it's a trade paper, you still have to get it right. Trump this morning tweets light at the end of the tunnel. My Republican friend Evan Siegfried tweets, at the time Trump tweeted this, 9,600 Americans have died from the coronavirus, with at least 100,000 more expected to die. The light at the end of the tunnel feels like a train coming right for us. I mean, my reporter friends have started to call these briefings the 5 o'clock follies. For those of you old enough to remember the Vietnam War, you know what that means.
And for the rest?
That was the military telling us how many people they killed each day at 5 o'clock, as if that meant that they were winning the war. Mark Hertling, who is, of course, actually military, said, stop telling us how many masks and how many this and how many that. Nobody cares. Tell us how many days' worth of supplies you are talking about here. It's a DOS, day of supply situation.
That's a good
if you
point.
say you have 1 million masks, who cares if you go through it in an hour?
Well, then we would have a different problem. But yeah, I'd like to know.
Tell us how many days' worth you have in the stockpile. That's what we want to know.
And that's good advice for a number of reasons, not the least of which would be dealing with the...
They're pretty good at logistics. Why don't you listen to them?
Well, dealing with the people at the White House who keep saying, you don't need that much. I guess if you expressed it in days of supply and said, well, you just sent us 4 hours worth, it's a good point.
Right. So the New York Times piece says, ignoring expert opinion, Trump again promotes use of hydroxychloroquine.
Yeah.
That's the headline.
Right.
And that's a pretty good headline.
Yes.
And Lawrence Glickman writes, the only Trump statement that should have been quoted from this briefing, or what do I know, I'm not a doctor, which he did say, and that he does these briefings not to inform, but for, quote, the free airtime and good ratings, end quote.
Yes, that's right. Big part of it.
Rather than a lead with the language of heroic agency, Trump is doubling down and treading lightly and all this stuff. How about ignoring expert advice? Trump, who has acknowledged to his staff that he uses these briefings for the free airtime and good ratings, dangerously misled and quite possibly endangered the public by endorsing an unproven therapy.
Yeah. Yes.
That's what's going on. That's how it should have been written. And, of course, they're failing on the job. And I keep saying these shouldn't be covering these publicity rallies live. Literally, for an hour and a half, Trump said nothing yesterday. There was no news.
I watched everybody say there was none.
And so the only news was right at the very end when Fauci came out and tried to speak, and Trump wouldn't let him. And then Trump quickly ended the press conference.
Yeah. And I guess he anticipated that because there was other part of the big news was a fight between Fauci and Peter Navarro in one of the meetings, prepping for, doing whatever it is they do with their meetings, but fighting over those over the promotion of these unproven drugs. So, and with Navarro accusing Fauci of all sorts of things, and you're now they're trying to pin the ineffectiveness of the administration's response on Fauci, who's the only one who knew what was going on. Quite scary. So,
yes, there you have it.
Okay, well that's it. We got it now.
You got it now.
Okay.
Let's see what else we got here. Adam Serwer had a nice piece that was about a week old, but it's still true. Donald Trump's cult of personality did this. The autocratic political culture that has propped up the Trump administration has left the nation entirely unprepared for an economic and public health calamity, and they are happening jointly. Every once in a while we focus on the health stuff and forget the economics. Every once in a while we focus on the economics and forget the health stuff, but it's happening simultaneously. And as Adam writes, neither the tide of pestilence sweeping the nation nor the economic calamity that will follow was inevitable. They are the predictable outcomes of the president's authoritarian instincts, his obvious incompetence, and the propaganda apparatus that has shielded him from accountability by ensuring that the public is blinded to his role in the scale of this disaster. But as the historians note, don't worry, it didn't help Herbert Hoover, and it's not going to help Trump either. Josh Krasauer, conservative, tweets this: given that Trump brought back the cure worse than the disease rhetoric yesterday, it's worth noting that the percentage of voters saying the opposite hit record highs yesterday in the Navigator research poll. This is from the pundit roundup, but let me give you the actual poll itself, because that's always fun to look at. That's why I'm looking forward to tomorrow's. And that is, on thinking about the impact of coronavirus on you, which are you more worried about? You and your family's health and well-being, or you and your family's financial situation?
Oh, okay.
Okay, health and well-being, 79. You and your family's financial situation, 21. Mid-March, it was 64-36.
Okay. That seems to be going in the right direction.
In thinking about the impact of coronavirus on the country, which are you more worried about? People's health or the economy? 62% health, 38% economy, was 49-51.
Well,
so people are now starting to worry about their own situation.
Yes.
This is like asking about the economy in the middle of a recession.
Right.
You know, is it a recession or a depression? How do you know the difference? You know, the old joke, which is not a joke, but it's still true. It's a recession when you know somebody out of work, and it's a depression when you're out of work.
Yep, we remember.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, if you ask about the country, well, people are less concerned about the country than their own personal situation right now, which makes them focus, which, by the way, is not good for Donald Trump.
No.
And then Krasauer notes, the Republicans split 50-50 down the middle on the question of health versus economy, which Josh adds explains the divide between Larry Hogan and Mike DeWine on the one hand, and Brian Kemp and Ron DeSantis on the other.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, sometimes we yell at the governors and say, you're not leading, you're stupid, you're an idiot, you're a jerk, you're a moron, you're killing us, you're incredibly lazy, you don't read, you know, and they say, yeah, but look at what my constituents want.
You know.
Well, in normal times, when it's not a crisis, that's sort of an okay answer. It's not great, but you understand at least where they're coming from.
Yes.
In crisis times, you're supposed to say, yeah, but I'm a leader. I have to do what's supposed to do, whether you like it or not. I'm Mike DeWine.
You would hope so, yes.
Well, you know, some of them are stepping up. Larry Hogan is. Baker, I think, in Massachusetts is doing okay. These are Republican governors.
Northern.
There are Democrats who are doing an awful job. Bill de Blasio.
He's Northern.
But there are some Democrats who are doing a fantastic job.
What else is de Blasio? I mean, I know he blew it at the outset.
Well, look, he didn't close down the St. Patrick's Day Parade until he had to.
Yes,
he didn't close the schools until he had to.
Right.
And then he pulled a Brian Kemp and said, well, I didn't know it was asymptomatic spread. Right. Fauci said yesterday 50% of it may come from asymptomatic spread, but we've known this for weeks. My charitable interpretation of what Brian Kemp and Bill de Blasio were attempting to say is that the scientists have new information, and based on that, we're changing our recommendation.
I mean, that's what they were trying to say. But
that's not an unreasonable talking point, but they have to make it about them. And so they ad-lib like Trump does and says, I didn't know until yesterday that this was true, and that's why I did what I did. I have to justify what I did last week.
Yes.
And so if you're a comms person writing these talking points, you're pulling your hair out and saying, stick to the talking points I wrote. They're good enough. You are not a communications genius. Read what I wrote you. And neither Kemp nor de Blasio did, and now they look stupid.
Yeah. Okay.
That's my charitable interpretation.
Okay.
Right? The non-charitable interpretation is that they're really stupid. They don't understand how serious this is. They haven't followed it the way some of us have. And if you're the governor, you're supposed to be. It's not like, okay, well, normal people aren't going to be obsessively looking at those curves to see if you're the governor. You're supposed to be doing that right now. What else is more important?
Nothing. Yeah, but I mean, I understand. I guess I don't understand.
You got public health people who are doing that for you and telling you what's going on. What is wrong with you?
Yeah, I don't know. There may be no explanation for de Blasio or no explanation worth giving. I just thought, you know, it's just such a strange way of approaching things, given who I thought he was. He wasn't. I never thought him to be this fantastically competent person or anything. But what explains?
Well, it's not even a question of competent or incompetent. This is one of those situations where I think the operative word is decisive.
Okay.
You either can make a decision or you can't. And if you're the executive,
All right.
and in fact the chief executive of your state, your number one job is making decisions.
Execute. Sure. Yeah. I mean, I guess
You're the executive. You're supposed to execute all your enemies.
Yes, right. They do that.
Well, that's what Trump thinks.
That I'm sure that I wouldn't put it past him. Certainly, it may just be that De Blasio just was not suited for the job.
Yeah, you have to think that, because I get that this might catch you unawares, but by now that's no excuse.
I mean, I just
you could use that mid-March. You can't use it mid-April.
Yeah, I just thought his innate, sense of empathy would do it, but I guess not. That's really amazing. Well, I guess you can be terribly suited to an executive job by nature, even though you're the kind of person that ordinarily would say, oh, this has the possibility of really hurting people I'm supposed to be caring for. I want to do something about that. I thought that would sort of be an automatic trigger, and I guess it's not. And
well, let me put it this way. I know I'm a partisan. I even use it in my handle, Dem from Connecticut. But partisans can be correct. And when I say Donald Trump sucks, that's not a partisan thing to say. How do I know? Because Bill de Blasio sucks.
Yeah, I guess so. Right. So, now you can say it's
and Mike DeWine is good.
Yeah.
At least for this. I'm not saying that, he's not going to sneak in some anti-abortion stuff, but for the most part, what he's trying to do is save lives. And I think that's great. And I think that, credit ought to go where credit is due.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm in agreement there. I'm still very surprised. I mean, I knew people had sort of soured on de Blasio for a number of reasons.
A long time ago, yeah, because he's not very good.
Yeah, but
Anyway, back to the Navigator poll. Downplaying when he should have been preparing. There's been a 7-point increase since March 23rd in the percentage of Americans saying they're seriously concerned that Trump downplayed the threat of the coronavirus early on. That's the key thing, because that's what November election is going to be about. The majority of white non-college Americans, a usually supportive group, say they are seriously concerned that Trump downplayed the threat. Trump failed to take action at a critical stage. Most call President Trump unprepared. And the declining numbers say Trump is honest. So all of that's going to matter. The public sees early missteps at the root of the current crisis, which, by the way, is true. Yes. A plurality of Americans, 47%, are more concerned that Trump was unprepared and made early mistakes than they are about the lack of action right now. Because Trump's going to keep saying, well, look what we're doing today. Look what we're doing tomorrow.
That's interesting.
Look at that shiny penny over there.
Yeah.
And the public's going to say, but we're in this situation because you screwed up a month ago when you told us it was going to go away. Well, forget about that. Look about this. Well, we're not interested in this as much as we are about remembering what you did.
That is
well, that's not what I want. I'm trying to change the subject. Yeah, I know you are.
Interestingly, I understand from the discussion over the weekend that Democrats in Congress apparently prepared to go ahead with investigating exactly the opposite of the priorities of the respondents to that poll, that they want to not look at preparedness and the lack of it, but rather look ahead towards investigating price gouging, etc.
Well, there are some things that matter to people.
That matters.
Doesn't mean you can't do both. People can walk and chew gum at the same time.
I'm saying
you got different committees, I'm told.
Yeah, well, the one that's being formed here and is in its nascent stages here, apparently fighting a relapse of don't look backward syndrome, which is apparently a seasonal and recurring illness for Democrats.
Well, not just Democrats. I think politicians are incredibly scared of setting a precedent where you're actually going to hold people accountable for what they do.
That may be true. And that is the one thing that's true. It's a good point because it rings in the back of my mind all the time, is that the people are just very uncomfortable with the idea of saying the person who was supposed to do all this stuff, to execute all these decisions, has done so poorly, we need to hold them to account. And then they say, how would I do in that situation? What if I was trying my best and then
which is why there's a little bit of sympathy there. The other thing that comes to mind is something that someone said, and you're in a much better position to evaluate this than me, so I'll throw it on you to answer.
All right, why not?
And that is that a lot of people in Congress, especially in the House, but even in the Senate sometimes, people get to be specialists at one thing. They're like really good at one thing. It's how they got elected, and it's how they make their, reputation.
All right.
And now they're being asked to do something else, which they don't know anything about. And they're like terrified of this because like, I don't know anything about that. And you expect me to show leadership and knowledge.
That could be. I mean, it's certainly...
Does that ring true? I mean, do you find that people are specialized in one thing and really don't know that much about everything?
Very often that is the case, and I guess it's interesting. The cure for it is typically at the staff level, and the staff suffers from the same thing, but you can collect 6, 7, 8, 10 of them if you need to and say, I have 10 issue area experts, and you just literally divide up your staff that way. You pay attention to this, this, and this.
Right. I mean, I can remember speaking to Senator Murphy, my senator, about pandemic issues a decade ago.
Yeah,
right?
so
and
prepared.
Well, the thing is, he was a foreign policy expert, but he brought his health staffer with him. Yeah,
you figure this out.
Yeah, and a lot of the discussion, Chris is a smart guy, and a lot of it, he knew a lot more than I thought he was going to. But a lot of the discussion was with his staffer.
Yeah, and then it's his job to discuss that with him, with his staffer afterwards, and help digest that. And
right, exactly. So you're right. I mean, if you don't know this, then just hire some. But what I'm saying is that, like, the whole impulse is, don't ask me about stuff I don't know about. I don't want to do this.
Well, maybe.
I was never interested in it. Now you're making me be interested. Not only that, worse than making me interested in something I'm not interested in, you're suggesting I should be accountable for how I act with something I'm not really interested in. That's not why I'm here.
Yeah.
And, people just have to get over that.
Oh, no. Well, I'm not certain I will. But okay.
I'm not certain they will either. But, it's always an interesting dynamic when you try to hold Congress accountable for something really important. And by the way, that's why there's leaders. I know that there's like this whole thing, this whole side discussion about why didn't Bernie do as well as he should have. And I think that there was some great insight by Hans Noel, a political scientist who wrote The Party Decides. Yeah. And he had a quote on this from over the weekend that I'm going to try to round up because I just thought it was really good and kind of summarized the dynamic that was going on during the presidential primary. And he wrote, "We can have 1,000,002 postmortems on Bernie Sanders' campaign, but they all come down to the same thing. Politics in a democracy is fundamentally about building coalitions, but the Sanders approach is instead about having good ideas."
Okay.
And that's fine. I mean, and Sanders really does have a lot of good ideas and things that should be, really serious. So you can say the same in spades for Elizabeth Warren.
True.
But still,
you
have to build a coalition to win. If you don't do that, you're going to lose.
Yes, or have one built for you.
But you got to get more votes than the other person, or you're not going to be, for example, the nominee.
That's true. But you might be an advisor to the nominee.
But you might be. So, I mean, the whole idea is what you're trying to do here is different than just having good ideas. And if you are getting yourself elected on just having a good idea, that's fine. But you got to, dare I say it, pivot and go to the larger picture here. And why do I bring that up in the middle of this discussion? Because something that always bugs me about the really militant Bernie people is how they loathe and despise Pelosi.
They do.
Which has always bothered me because, like, she is a great speaker, like one of the historically great speakers. Doesn't do everything right. But to not understand what her role is. And we've talked about this on the show many, many, many times, and you have as well. And part of that role is protecting her majority. True. That's her job. And so if you don't understand what the job is and you hate her for I don't know why, fill in the blank, and don't recognize A, that she has a specific job, and B, that she's really good at it, is disturbing. And it all gets back to I don't like the party. Well, that's probably why we're not getting along anyway.
Yeah, that could be.
You're asking somebody to run and win in a party you despise, and then you hate their leaders, and then you can't figure out how come you couldn't build a coalition.
Yes. I think that's true. That's probably at the heart of it. Yeah, well, a lot
it's
of
got
our
nothing to do
problems,
with whether or not, this
Pelosi's
particular
problems.
Bernie person was mean to me on Twitter. No, it's way bigger
there is
than that.
But yeah.
It's way bigger than that. My
Yeah.
Bernie friends, who we get along with great, have this innate loathing for Democratic leadership. And what I'm saying is that in times of crisis, you need leadership so badly for various and sundry reasons. One of them is to hold the House together and get stuff done, which is vital to do in a crisis. And the leader, the speaker, is really the only one in Congress that can do that.
Yeah. I mean, we
And
have that problem. Yeah. I've run
see
into it before.
shutdowns, you see it. You see it. Pick a crisis. This is a really big one.
Yeah.
But in
So
any
where is
crisis,
this-
that's the case. Since the underrate, and to have somebody like Tim Ryan or Seth Moulton or some of these, guys, say, I could be the speaker. I'm just going to run against her. Too old. Okay. No. And now you're seeing why you need somebody who can do the job.
True.
That's my rant for today.
All right. Where is the Hans Gruber quote there? Hans Noah.
Hans Noah. I'll give it to you right now. It was in my Saturday Twitter. Saturday roundup.
There. I like Hans Gruber myself, but all right. Yeah, we'll take Hans Noah instead. And I've run into this before. We very frequently run into this problem because there's this weird, I don't know whether it's exactly a misunderstanding, but Democrats, activist leftists, if they don't want to identify as Democrats, they run into this problem a lot with the speaker because, the speaker is a constitutional role and leader of a party in Congress, and because she sort of speaks for the Democrats and lots of people consider themselves Democrats, they say, well, if the leader of the Democrats ought to be speaking for me, or we should get one that does, and there's the coalitional politics.
Why? Because we have better ideas.
Yeah, well, typically.
Well, maybe you do.
Or, they may even have a better way of executing the ideas and hammering together the coalition. I guess what we forget from time to time is that Nancy Pelosi, as Speaker, has a constituency, and we're not in it. And that's a better prediction of where she's going to go, is responding to her constituency. The constituency is the House Democratic Caucus membership, the elected members. And yes, they should be responsive to you. And sure, there are more progressive elements. But yeah, her job in chief is keeping the coalition of her constituency together and to take the heat when members of her constituency say we want the policy to go in this direction, whether Pelosi does or not. It's not Pelosi deciding all the time. Very often it's her saying, well, I need to assemble a coalition, but the bulk of this coalition is pulling me that way. That's not where I want to go, but my job is, one, to hold us together and go there if I think we can survive it, and two, to say it's on me anyway so that nobody finds out who the vulnerable members are who I'm covering for by pulling us this way. They're vulnerable. I will take that heat off of them. And yeah, I mean, it doesn't make it any easier to understand. Yeah. Right, and it's not comforting, but I don't know. I guess we first
it's
kind of
never going to make you happy.
Stumbled
but,
into
you
this.
can understand at least the logic behind it.
Yeah. Well, I probably first stumbled into this when people were saying way back when people wanted Joe Lieberman thrown out of the Senate Democratic Caucus or to lose his committee seats when he was being overly critical of Democrats in general and even sucking up to Republicans and then finally speaking at their convention. And finding out, well, okay, what's the mechanism by which that would happen? You'd be talking to the Steering and Policy Committee of the Senate Democratic Caucus and asking them to do that, and then finding out that they weren't really particularly interested in citizen input into this system because it wasn't built for that. It's a member services organization, like the DCCC is too. And people wonder about, well, why can't we change the direction of the DCCC and have them do this or promote these kinds of candidates, or why do they tell us not to primary people?
I don't understand why the Chamber of Commerce isn't more progressive.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's basically it. And it's sad, and there are
we should change the direction
theories.
of the Chamber of Commerce and get them to listen to the constituents instead of the businesses that fund them.
Well, yes. Yes. I mean, it doesn't really work that way.
Why
Although
don't
there
you
are
get a
plenty
different
of
organization if that's what you want to do.
that, or there are plenty of good theories about why it might be better for the members in that membership organization to campaign this way instead of the way they say. But yeah, it's awfully difficult to get them to listen to that when the job of the people doing the day-to-day work is, listen, if you don't respond to the membership of this group, you're out. You're just not going to be the person we have do this job. And even though we may have better ideas.
Quick story before the break, and I'm gone, about coalition politics and how that plays out. So it's 12 years ago. And I'm at various and sundry meetings in Washington about trying to get the federal government to take care of pandemic preparedness and get this done a little bit better than they're doing. And who's at the table? Lots of people. There's faith-based groups like the Mormons, who are really good at prepping, by the way. And there's citizens like myself. I'm the blogging community who's asking for this from the constituent point of view, and, of course, the politicians. And the fourth group there is business, represented by the Chamber of Commerce. And Chamber of Commerce has their own disaster preparedness person who's actually a staffer who works there full time. And we're all at this meeting, and, I'm just observing that, the Chamber of Commerce people all have really short hair, and they all look like they served in the military, and, they're all, like, not exactly blogger culture, if you will.
Yes.
But if you're there doing the same thing at the same time, and you say to the Chamber of Commerce types, listen, this is going to affect your business. How are you going to, how is UPS going to function? There wasn't an Amazon back in the day. How are you going to deliver stuff? What about your own people? What about the folks who wind up working here but also spend 2 years in Germany? What about, how is it going to affect your international company when you can't get information and staff and so on and so forth? What about if the schools are closed and your kids need to be watched and you can't go? And they say, those are all good points. Maybe we should be on the same page about this.
Yeah, why not?
It doesn't mean I adopt Chamber of Commerce culture.
Yes, it does. Okay, no, that's true.
No,
now you built a coalition, and it works.
Down the road there.
Right. We can always come back to that. Yeah, this is very true, very interesting. And there was an Amazon back then. It was just Earth's biggest bookstore. That's all. I remember the ads. Okay, thanks, Greg. We'll
Take care.
catch
See you
up
Wednesday.
again Wednesday. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. All right. Well, we have we'll make a quick change in direction and head back to where we were starting at the beginning of the show. Although great distractions, I thought there's so many tracks on which you could be analyzing this thing. So I thank Greg for bringing us in that direction. And you're sending me now the Queen's speech to the UK. I did happen to see that the other day, and but this is a new take. Let's see, what is this here? She gave, a very regal, I guess, speech. I have no experience with queens, of course, except for the dramatic interpretations of them on Netflix these days. But what's this? Good evening. I am here with you tonight to announce that you have all messed up, and I am reasserting my divine right to rule this land as I see fit. That would have worked as well. And might as well have been the declaration. Who's Patrick is it Chovanec? Is that how he says it? I have no idea. Well, he's an economic advisor at Silvercrest Asset Management. Very important for everyone to know that. And an adjunct professor at Columbia University. You probably would know him better from that. The Columbia University School of International and Public Affairs. But he makes his money at Silvercrest Asset Management, I think. Yes, well, she gave a very, normal, like, queen-type speech saying that I was very, we're all very upset here for what you have to go through. Greg says he is a conservative China expert. That is, he's conservative, not an expert in conservative China. And I guess, although the White House has an enormous collection of conservative China, if you were interested in that. But that's not what it's about. All right. But yes, she gave a very nice little speech the other day about how concerned she was for all of her people, etc. She has a constituency as well. But she might as well have stepped in and taken over from on a royal prerogative, because Boris Johnson, some people say the actual Prime Minister of the UK, is 1, coronavirus positive, and 2, now hospitalized, I understand. Now, the PR apparatus for number 10, as they say, this is essentially our White House, but you know how it works there. But the PR apparatus says that his hospitalization is, well, they were trying to spin it a little bit, saying it was, I don't know. Well, let's see if I can find the tweet in which they were trying to clarify. But they said, no real serious specific cause for alarm. We're simply admitting him to the hospital to take a look at how he's doing with his symptoms and why haven't they cleared up yet. So we're not like getting ready to intubate him and put him on a ventilator or anything. We're just checking him out. Although, again, why anybody would burden a hospital with their care and or really honestly, why would you even show up at a hospital at this stage of the game unless you had a very serious problem on your hands? I don't know. But that was the spin. Yeah, here it is. I found a tweet yesterday from Joe Pike, who a political correspondent at Sky News over in the UK, saying, tweeting that his breaking news was that Johnson had been admitted to the hospital after 10 days with COVID-19. Number 10, not the 10th day, but number 10 Downing Street, you see. Stress, it is precautionary step. I don't think I've heard of that. And in fact, in most cases, if you show up at the hospital, even positive with coronavirus, and say, as a precautionary step, I'm coming to get checked out, they say, get the hell out of here. We don't have any room. But if you're the Prime Minister of the UK, I guess they will make an exception for you. On advice of his doctor, the Prime Minister has been tonight admitted, I've changed some words around here, admitted to hospital for tests. You know how they say that in the UK. I love that expression. You're in hospital. Or we say you're in the hospital here. But that's the condition as they describe it, being in hospital or being admitted to hospital for tests. This is a precautionary step as the Prime Minister continues to have persistent symptoms of coronavirus 10 days after testing positive for the virus. And I think that's kind of a bad sign generally. It doesn't mean you're going to die from coronavirus, but if you are one of the lucky ones who are going to have a mild case of it, your symptoms, I guess once you develop them, ought to be on the mend after 10 days, I guess, or I don't know. Anyway, who knows what they're doing? Well, I'm not a doctor. I should stop guessing. The Prime Minister thanks NHS staff, believe it or not, even though he's trying to get rid of it, for all their incredible hard work and urges the public to continue to follow the government's advice to stay at home, despite the fact that they wouldn't give you that advice at first. Protect the NHS and now Boris Johnson, their most important patient, and save lives, specifically Boris Johnson's. That wasn't part of their message, but, we read between the lines on that one. Who else is... I haven't heard anything about Prince Charles, though I understand he had coronavirus as well, but no updates on him. But I would imagine that they're being rather intensely private about how he's doing. Also, no word on how Rand Paul is doing, and I hate to mention the two of them together. They bear no relationship whatsoever to one another. As far as I know, no neighbors of any kind, and he's got a lot of properties, Prince Charles, but no neighbors of his have ever tackled and pummeled him the same way they have with Rand Paul. Not that the neighbor did anything wrong as far as I can tell, but I just I found that I found it interesting that we're not getting much in the way of updates and a little worrisome. So we'll see if we can't figure any of these things out. Let's see, some more messages from Greg. Do we have any information on any of them, or are we getting something else here? It's something else. Okay, well, we can check back in on that in a later date. I was saying at the beginning of the show, though, that it's become apparent, and I don't know if we've seen it nailed down anywhere, but a lot of people speculating it at different levels. My speculation, of course, totally irresponsible speculation. Josh Marshall, though, coming to much the same conclusion in a very responsible way, peering at you over the top of his glasses. Very responsible look that he's put on here. But reaching the same conclusion, what appears to be happening here, just to recap, Trump declining to take on the expected and these days traditional role for the federal government of coordinating the needs of the states when there are several states in need of the same emergency assistance. Instead, saying they ought to all be seeking it themselves, which is not so much a theory of federalism as it is an excuse for the finding that most sane people have reached, that the federal government was woefully unprepared for this crisis, and this all despite the fact that we've now uncovered 5, 6, 7 instances in which the administration was warned, or that people whose job it is to warn the administration had attempted to warn the administration, but they had simply paid no attention to it because it's not interesting, or they couldn't figure out how to make money from it, or it wasn't golf, or whatever the reasoning is. The president was ignoring it. Presidents ignore a lot of things. I don't see how you couldn't ignore a lot of things. But again, here's the staff issue. You're supposed to have competent staff around you and enough of an apparatus that somebody can always pay attention to the things that don't capture your imagination right off the bat. But in this case, plenty of people ignoring this. Let's see. And as a matter of fact, okay, so Greg sends us the confirmation we need in terms of, if you were wondering, gee whiz, am I really being unfair about counting the government as woefully underprepared for this pandemic? You're fine. What has he sent me here? With the tweet of Jeremy, oh my goodness, Kanindijk? I don't know how you pronounce this. What is this name? This is, well, no reason to worry over getting the pronunciation right, but with the HHS-IG report out today, confirming the shocking lack of readiness in U.S. hospitals, a reminder, Konijndijk, there we go. Have I got what syllable? But Konijndijk, but that's a good pronunciation guide. I don't know where you put the emphasis. Anyway, HHS-IG report out today confirming the shocking lack of readiness in U.S. hospitals. Reminder that this has been apparent for 2+ months. Retweeting his own tweet of February 10th here, had a very concerning chat with the hospital exec recently about preparedness for novel coronavirus, which he calls lowercase n, capital C-O, capital V. So it's kind of like that hacker speak where they capitalize every other letter there. But what was the discussion about? And he was Obama's Ebola emergency advisor. Is that right? Okay. Well, I missed the chance to worked under Klain. Klain I remember, and Klain's name I can pronounce, but this one, no. Anyway, U.S. hospitals nowhere near ready for conditions like we're seeing in China. This is back on February 10th. Neither are those in the developing world. If anything, this New York Times report may be too rosy, and he includes a link to it. What was that rosy assessment? Inundated with flu patients, U.S. hospitals brace for coronavirus. So, right. Oh, and that was all at the time when Trump, well, even a little earlier than when Trump was saying, it's just like the flu. But then never stopping to note, by the way, hospitals are already flooded with flu patients, and this isn't like the flu, and it's a lot worse. And it alone could swamp us, but we're never going to face it alone. We're going to face it alongside flu that we already have and every other problem that we have in this country. Anyway, so let's see. Trump, by way of excusing himself for not being prepared, says, well, the real reason that we're not prepared is we're not supposed to be prepared. States are supposed to be prepared. And we just hang out and watch to see whether the states are prepared. And if they're not, we yell at them. I guess that's what he thought the role of the federal government was in all of this. But he really didn't. Again, just like everything else, he doesn't have a plan. He doesn't have a theory about these things. All he has is, well, whatever it is, it's not my fault. And whatever reason I have to come up with to make it not my fault, I will come up with it. Whether it is true or not doesn't matter. I'm still going to say it. And because we govern by Wikipedia editing, it will become true after the fact, even if I'm completely wrong. Witness what we found at the end of last week when Jared Kushner, for some reason, got to speak at the presser for the coronavirus update and said that the national stockpile wasn't for you, it was for him, basically. These are our masks and our supplies. And then people asked, what do you mean by our? And anybody who actually asked that out loud got a "you asked a nasty question, you should shut up, the press is such a bunch of liars" answer from Trump. So he comes up with this kooky answer about what the federal government is supposed to be doing. Jonathan Turley apparently out there for some reason trying to help him justify that answer, but he puts it on the states. You need to get prepared. That creates a Wild West economic atmosphere as states bid against one another for the supplies that they either need immediately, needed yesterday, or will need in the future. So who knows how we can value those supplies properly. That's supposed to be coordinated by one brokerage, essentially, in order to do it the most efficient way. And it's not going to result in great results that everybody agrees with every time. There are going to be states that say, we need this either immediately or to be prepared for the future, but which a single buying authority would otherwise divert somewhere else for various reasons. Normally, with a normal president, you're hoping that the diversion is at least their best guess at where the goods can do the most good at any particular moment. The nightmare situation, of course, which we have with Trump, is that the decision is made politically based on which states are most important to me in the upcoming election, or where did the governors say nice things about me versus where didn't they say nice things about me. In the middle of all this, though, the federal government, realizing without saying so that, yes, we understand we've fallen behind here. People are accusing us of being unprepared. My first line excuse is, well, it's not my job to be prepared. It's your job to be prepared. But if it is my job to be prepared, then I better go out and get prepared. Then the federal government jumped into the bidding market for all of this stuff, too, in order to fill up the stockpile so that they look like they were prepared, even though they were saying they didn't have to be. But not only did I not have to be, but I was anyway. That's how good of a job I'm doing here, is what he's going for. But the market is extremely tight here. At some point, though, Trump and or Kushner begin to realize that the federal government has enormous powers that the state governments don't have to make sure that the stockpiles that are available go to them rather than the states. So there's no sort of even playing field at all out there. I guess it's semi-even among the states, except that, some states will have a budgetary advantage and an economic advantage by the size of their budget and the amount of buying that they need to do, et cetera, et cetera. But, in free market situations, we're meant to think that that's an even playing field. But the federal government can step in and exercise extraordinary powers to make sure that supplies go their way rather than to the states, up to and including, I guess, being able to step in and say, yes, the state of New York has purchased these goods and paid for them and has a bill of lading for them, and they are about to be shipped to New York. But the federal government now is stepping in and saying, essentially, who cares? They're talking like a pirate. Yoink, this now belongs to us. Send it to the federal government instead. The same federal government that just said, it's not our responsibility to be stocking up, and you ought to be stocking up instead of us, then says, but what if people don't believe that, and they really think we should be stocked up? We better stock up. So they go and essentially they seize these shipments that are supposed to be on the way to the different states and put them back in federal hands, which is enormously disruptive, for one thing. Two, it's not a level playing field for anybody. And three, what is it exactly? I mean, it's worth pausing and saying, why is it exactly that the federal government has these extraordinary powers that they are able to go in there and say, that doesn't belong to you, it belongs to me? What is that power? How does that work? Well, aside from the nuts and bolts of it, which I don't really have in front of me, and which statutes afford them this ability, if any, and it may not even be that there are any in place that definitively outline this. They're relying, though, on what they say are constitutional powers to do it. Now, these would be powers that are based on, I guess, mostly claims of the executive in the past, upheld along the way in a line of cases of, it's judicial precedent that says, in such a case, we would, in fact, defer to the federal government as against the states here in order to manage an emergency in particular. Federal powers would be at their height. Now, federal powers are at their height in cases of responding to emergencies because it is generally accepted, and has been for some time, that in a situation like this where states would otherwise ordinarily be competing against one another in the marketplace for emergency supplies, it makes much more sense for a single buyer to be able to coordinate all of that stuff and distribute the supplies as necessary. In other words, the powers that Trump and his cronies now are using to seize these goods exist precisely because his understanding of federalism is backward, and that everyone else's understanding of federalism is that the federal government needs those powers in order to effectively marshal resources on a national scale. But he's claiming the opposite so that no one blames him for being unprepared, while at the same time claiming the opposite of the opposite, and that the federal government does have the power and responsibility. They have the power to do it because they are perceived as having the responsibility for doing it. And I don't know, I guess that becomes too difficult for people to understand, or certainly if members of the press do come to understand it and ask such a question at a press conference, they get the, that's a nasty question, it's a gotcha, you shouldn't be doing it, the press is such liars answer. And, well, for the most part, they then back off and complain about it later. And we all complain about it too. But in the meantime, he's doing all of this. Now, one thing I also began to think about, of course, was if the federal government was doing this to the states, and the person who was occupied the office of the chief executive, Donald Trump, is the one behind it, is there anything that I can think of in the personal makeup, and I don't mean the orange makeup, but I mean I was going to say the constitutional makeup, but not that either, but the personal, the personality of Donald Trump. Is there anything about the personality of Donald Trump that makes me think that he would hesitate to attempt to do the same thing to other countries that he does with the states? Now, normally a president, might be able to justify to himself in times of crisis, there are these federal powers as against the states, and I could and should exercise them, but it would be outside of my recognized power to say I can exercise this jurisdiction as against France, Germany, some other country. Why should France be able to treat its patients when Americans are sick? Well, only Donald Trump would have that occur to him, and it would only occur to Trump because he probably, it's something that he might be willing to do in his regular business practice. To the extent that anybody believed that he was really a businessman, he might, be out on the prowl looking for ways to snap up or steal away or simply outbid, even after the fact, after the sale's been concluded, outbid the buyer in order to snap up supplies for himself. And he probably thought of that as just, sharp business practice, even though it probably violates a number of laws. But, honestly, with a relatively small concern like Trump's, the law hasn't often been an issue for him. They're just not looking at him, despite the fact that he thinks he's one of the biggest businessmen in the world. He really isn't. But I begin to wonder, let's see, when did I wonder this? I can go and take a look. This would be early Saturday. Oh no, yeah, Saturday afternoon, I guess. Thinking to myself about it and saying, I'll make a prediction, although it turned out that I was too late. We're going to start seeing extraterritorial interdiction by the U.S. here. In addition to seizing shipments between states or bound for the states, we're going to start seeing it on the country level. We'll start seeing extraterritorial interdiction by the U.S., seizing, redirecting, and outright stealing PPE shipments and ventilator shipments. And I said piracy, actually, which is what it is, if you think about it. Or in the case of the so-called partners of Jared Kushner's Project Airbridge, I guess you could call it privateering in a way. And I said, as a matter of fact, I then was looking around and I said, we're almost there. Here's an article from The Guardian, which was dated, I think, Friday, as a matter of fact. See, I said I was already late. Friday afternoon, so almost a day late. I then found U.S. hijacking mask shipments in rush for coronavirus protection. So I guess we ought to dive into that one. The fears of shortages are driving many countries to take increasingly devious measures to secure masks and tests. Let's take a quick look. I mean, you get the flavor for it, but some specifics. U.S. buyers waving wads of cash. Well, who are the buyers? I don't know. It doesn't matter, right? U.S. buyers waving wads of cash managed to wrest control of a consignment of masks as it was about to be dispatched from China to one of the worst hit coronavirus areas of France, according to two French officials. And I know Ricky here, Ricky, our Kanakistani, Ricky May, who says he is doing this to other countries. Yeah, I know. We're getting to that. She's worried about her own country, of course, which is another of the countries we've been doing to this to, Canada. He has told 3M to stop shipping PPE outside the U.S. That's another instance of the same type of story, slightly different, but essentially the same. But a shipment of masks bought and paid for and made for Canadian consumption under contract with 3M, all paid for, all ready to go, and they said, you can't ship it. We're seizing it, and we're using it here. And I don't know how you do that to the Canadians. I mean, I understand the sentiment of the panic is what it is. Oh my God, we can't be doing this in America first, and no one gets that. And they're an American concern, 3M, and we should, all of their output should be nationalized, which is an amazing thing for conservatives to be saying. But yeah, true, immediate impact on Canada. But you're not alone by a long shot, Canada. I'm sorry this is happening to you, but you're not alone. France also got hit with this one. Ready? The masks were on a plane at Shanghai Airport when they were shanghaied. I guess this is where this comes from. On a plane at Shanghai Airport that was ready to take off when the U.S. buyers, whoever they are, official, unofficial, don't know who they are, turned up and offered 3 times what their French counterparts were paying. I guess I was give it, is it Jean Rotner, or shall we say Jean Rotner? I don't know. A doctor and president of the Grand Est, Grandest, capital E, Grand Est Regional Council, said part of the order of several million masks heading for the region, where intensive care units are inundated with COVID-19 patients, has been lost to the buyers, or the pirates, is what they are. On the tarmac, they arrive, get the cash out. So we really have to fight, he told RTL Radio. Rotner would not identify the buyers. Go ahead, name names. Who they were working for, or which U.S. state the cargo was flown to. But another French official also involved in procuring masks from China said the group were acting for the U.S. government. So that's bad news, right? Now I'll skip down a little bit here. The icing on the cake, there is a foreign country that paid 3 times the price, that's us, of the cargo on the tarmac. This from Renaud Muselier, the head of the southern, oh my goodness, I can't even, it's one of the southern regions of France, and I can't even try to go through this, but he told this to the French channel BFM TV. The Guardian has contacted the U.S. State Department for comment. A senior administration told the AFP, the French press agency, that the United States government had not purchased any masks intended for delivery from China to France. Reports to the contrary are completely false. So I guess that's the State Department administration response. When the French press asked about it, they said, no, we haven't done that. But curiously, the British press says otherwise. And it actually gets worse. I won't be able to squeeze it in before we take our break, but we'll continue with this story on the other side. Yes, the P word, piracy, has actually been invoked by The Guardian, and I'll tease you with that, and we'll be right back to read it after this. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I promised you this one. I did see somebody in my tweets the other day, and I'm sorry I don't have the time to go back and grab which one of you clever folks did it. But we noticed that Trump, for whatever reason, was referring to, he said he was referring to the Defense Production Act as the P Act, which didn't make any sense whatsoever for a number of reasons. DPA, actually pretty short, and that's what it's called, not the P Act, and I don't even know what I want to think about that. But then somebody hinted at me, maybe the P Act, it isn't the Defense Production Act, it is the act of piracy that he's invoking here. And I'm not kidding. I mean, when I tweeted this on Saturday, I was behind the eight ball. Well, not behind the eight ball. I was just behind the times, I guess. I was also behind the eight ball, but behind the times in realizing that the word had already gotten out there. Even the first of the Guardian articles that I saw, which was nearly a day old by the time I saw it, and said, well, we're just stealing stuff from other countries. But then I went a little bit further and said, what is the difference between this and piracy? I mean, we just basically have shipments overseas being waylaid by, in the case of the masks going to France, I guess what made the difference was that we used money instead of broadswords and it was a plane instead of a ship. And it wasn't in international waters that we, attacked and boarded the ship, but it was the next closest thing, stuff that had cleared customs and was getting ready to take off from the airport in Shanghai on the way to France. And we simply waved money instead of swords and said, they've got to be extraordinarily, I'm sure they talked about this when they sent whoever they sent as buyers, that the supply chain is going to be extraordinarily vulnerable to this stuff. You're talking to, I guess, shipping people on the ground in China and waving cash at them. And I don't know, I guess if you're waving cash at the seller and saying, we'll give you 3 times the price, but are they also waving cash at the people working, the cargo workers? We'll give you, 10 years' wages to divert this shipment from this plane to that plane. Or I don't know, did they bribe the crew of the plane and say instead of flying to France, fly to the United States? I'm not entirely clear on what the mechanics were. But if you wave cash at people who are not particularly well-compensated workers, and we are finding out a lot about that and how much we depend on people who are not particularly well-compensated workers here in the United States, all the people that we thought of as unskilled labor, warehouse workers, grocery store workers, whatever, and we dismiss them with this terminology of unskilled labor and argue about whether or not they should make minimum wage at all and what the minimum wage should be. And now they're essential employees that are literally keeping us all alive. Not to mention the healthcare workers who don't get paid what they're supposed to be getting paid. But, if you find somebody like that who's essential to making the world work, who isn't particularly well paid, and tell them, I'll pay you more than you're going to make in 10 years to simply divert this shipment, they're going to take it. And, I'm sure they probably told him, as a cargo worker, look, when the masks don't show up in France is going to notice. But they're not going to start calling the cargo handlers and say what happened. They're going to yell at your bosses. Your bosses may or may not figure out what happened. But for one thing, if your boss fires you, that's fine. You've made 10 times your annual wages to do this once. But second, you're not going to have to field the phone calls asking about what happened to the masks. That'll be on somebody else. So this is a great deal. They've got to be extraordinarily vulnerable to that sort of thing. And then again, if they aren't, I guess then you put the sword to their throat. And I will say, go out on a limb and predict, I think it's entirely possible that we may see military interdiction. The United States using its military to steal shipments bound for other countries, in flight, perhaps, for all we know, and intercepting cargo planes and forcing them to divert and land in the United States or at a United States air base overseas. That'll be a real fight if it happens in another country. Imagine that, right? The flight bound for Germany, and instead we forced them to land at Ramstein Air Force Base and then claim it to be American property and forward it on from there. It's entirely possible. I was telling you, I was going to read you the next Guardian article. I said piracy. I don't know why they're not using the word piracy, but it turns out, again, I'm behind. And the Germans had already used that term. Here's Brian Monroe, one of our other Canadian correspondents and listeners, weighing in, saying some of those masks, I guess the 3M ones, were bound for Ontario and Newfoundland. Both premiers have called out Trump for his behavior, but you're going to have to invade us in order for that to matter. Newfoundland premier reminds U.S. of their assistance during 9/11, but you know how Trump feels about 9/11. It was chiefly about him now having the tallest building in southern Manhattan. And, of course, I'll remind you, in case you've forgotten, not that this isn't going to make you feel any better. It should make you feel worse. Trump stole 9/11 relief funds, too. Invoking 9/11 isn't going to make him feel guilty about things. It's going to make him think he did the right thing. You'll recall that I think he claimed that there was damage to some of his buildings when there wasn't, and he actually claimed, or he may have claimed, he was storing some materials for somebody, and that essentially was renting out storage space to people, but he put in for compensation for that through a fund that was meant for property owners who had suffered actual physical damage from the 9/11 attacks, and he stole that money too. So, invoking that, and, of course, 9/11 wasn't his problem. So you helped George W. Bush. Big deal. I hate that guy, is basically the answer. I mean, that's problematic, but that's where he is. Where the Germans are, according to The Guardian, U.S. accused of modern piracy, and that's in quotes, after diversion of masks meant for Europe. German politician adds to chorus of complaints, about American tactics to source protective gear. That's an interesting and creative way of putting it, source the protective gear. The U.S. has been accused of modern piracy after reportedly diverting a shipment of masks intended for the German police and outbidding other countries in the increasingly fraught global market for coronavirus protective equipment. About 200,000 N95 masks were diverted to the U.S. as they were being transferred between planes in Thailand, according to the Berlin authorities, who said they had ordered the masks for the police force. Andreas Giesel, the interior minister for Berlin state, described the diversion as, quote, an act of modern piracy, and appealed to the German government to demand Washington conform to international trading rules. Oh, look at this. We're the international trading rogues now. Not China, but China too. Don't lose sight of that. This is no way to treat transatlantic partners, Giesel said. I don't know whether it's Geisel or Giesel. I think Giesel, Geisel. Even in times of global crisis, there should be no Wild West methods. Piracy is... You were right on that one. The German reports said the masks had been made by a Chinese producer for the U.S. company 3M. Maybe, is that the ones that were bound for Ontario and Newfoundland? Or no, I guess these are for the German police. But maybe you lost some that way too. 3M's working at capacity, so they're outsourcing to a Chinese producer working for 3M. But the firm, 3M, I guess, issued a statement on Friday night saying, yes, 3M has no evidence to suggest 3M products have been seized. Okay. 3M has no record of any order of respirators from China for the Berlin police. We cannot speculate where this report originated. I mean, that could be true, or, it could be a matter of, hey, give me these masks. No, they're for the German police in Berlin. Really? How do you know they're for that? Well, I have this bill of sale and bill of lading right here. Oh, really? Grab that, tear it up, light it on fire. No, you don't. We have no evidence to suggest this. We have no record of any order of respirators from China. What do you know? Or maybe it's just as simple as Trump threatening 3M, as he's been doing all along, and how he ended up seizing the shipment bound for Canada by bullying 3M into all of it. I'm sure 3M does lots that we can blame them for. But, what if the word goes out? Listen, you simply put out this press statement that says that you have no record of it, or we'll, whatever it is, we'll kill you. I don't know what they threatened him with. The German allegations added to the chorus of complaints about the Trump administration's practice as the U.S. wields its clout in a marketplace for scarce medical supplies. Its clout. That is becoming a free-for-all with nation competing against nation. And that's not to mention states competing against states. By the way, so, I guess the long story of all this we shouldn't lose sight of is, so we end up, I don't know, let's say you're watching this from the United States and you're an idiot. That could happen, right? And so, all right, we've made these masks for France or Germany or whatever, and we're getting set to ship them. And in jump the U.S. buyers, whoever they are, waving who knows what cash. From where? I don't know. Is it my cash? Taxpayer money? I don't know. We'll pay you 3 times what the other buyer paid you, and send them instead of to France to the United States. And instead of sending these to Germany, send them to the United States. And Americans in need of this equipment say, yay, America first. I wasn't really a Trump supporter, and I still think he's kind of a jerk, and I'll never vote for him. But at least we're getting what we need, and he's an a-hole, but he's standing up for whatever it is that we need and getting us through whatever means necessary. And after all, no swords were used. It was just cash. That's fair game. It really isn't. But we say it's fair game because money instead of bullets. And we don't know what to make of it. Yay, we're saved. Except then in comes the shipment, and it lands, and New Yorkers say, terrific, we're finally going to get those masks we need. At which point the Trump administration says, we've stolen these things once, why don't we steal them again? Except this time maybe we don't pay for it. Now that they're in the United States, we exercise this emergency jurisdiction over them as the federal government, which power we should be denying ourselves because, of course, 2 days ago we said this isn't even our problem. The states should be getting it, and the states did get it. And now it's bound for New York. But the federal government says these are ours. They take them, put them in a FEMA warehouse, and now the big fear is they are then, what are they doing with it? They are not saying, well, these go to Illinois instead. Or these, not even saying that, not even saying these go to Florida because red state and red governor and whatever. They're saying these go to, what is it, Blue Flame Medical LLC and other weird pop-up middlemen resellers. So we take these things and say, here, they're yours. Does Blue Flame pay the federal government for them? No, not that we know of. They're just free. So we were going to give them for free to Florida, but screw that. Why don't we give them for free to Blue Flame? Blue Flame will sell them to Florida. Florida says, we've got the equipment we needed. The Trump administration called and said it's on its way. It's weird. We got this bill from something called Blue Flame Medical, but at this point, who cares? Just pay it. And fine. Now we've fulfilled our orders. But now we're talking about masks that were stolen from France, on their way to New York, stolen from New York and sent to Florida. instead. And it may happen that they are stolen from New York and sent to New Jersey, and then stolen from New Jersey and then given to Red Flame Medical LLC and resold there. They're stealing the masks and then reselling them 2-3 times. Sometimes they show up, sometimes they don't. They don't show up in France, they don't show up in Germany, but who cares about them? Well, they don't show up in New York or New Jersey either, but who cares about them because they vote blue, so screw all of that. And in the meantime, Blue Flame Medical has sold them and sold them and sold them again. Huge profits. Hooray for Jared Kushner's friends from management class at Harvard, a guy that lived down the hall that had that awesome app that never took off, but he really deserves a break. He'll become a reseller. Everybody I know gets to become a reseller in all this. It's a great deal. We've got to make great deals. So it's very interesting, the several roles that the Trump administration has invented for itself in all of this. So where were we? Let's see. The 3M people deny it because it's in their best interest to deny that their shipments are being waylaid overseas. The German allegations added to a chorus of complaints, as we said, about this happening all over the place. Let's see. The president of another of the French regions, I'll skip the French pronunciation, but this time the region including Paris, described the race to get masks as a treasure hunt, which is an interesting way of, that sounds fun, right? But actually, piracy was a treasure hunt, right? It's an article about piracy, everybody. I found a stock of masks that was available, and Americans, I'm not talking about the American government, he says in this one, but Americans outbid us. This guy, Valerie Precres, I'm guessing at the pronunciation of this. They offered 3 times the price, and they proposed to pay up front. I can't do that. I'm spending taxpayers' money, and I can only pay on delivery, having checked the quality. She, told BFM TV again. So we were caught out. So they're trying to purchase them the normal legal way a government does things. We purchase as pirates, and we win. That's where we'll jump, I think, out of, let's see. This article is then illustrated with some charts about COVID-19 in the various countries. I think there's more here that we might need to read, though. Pécresse, I'm guessing again at that pronunciation, said she had finally obtained a consignment of 1.5 million masks thanks to the help of Franco-Chinese residents in the Paris area. Wow. Her comments follow allegations from 2 other French regional heads that unidentified American buyers outbid on mask shipments, including one instance where a consignment was reportedly on the tarmac to be flown to France. We really have to fight. That was Jean Rotner, who we heard from in the last article. Following reports on his comments, Rotner said on Twitter, he's there, that it was not his order of 2 million masks that had been diverted, although it was common practice. This is interesting. New development on that front. So what was he talking about? Well, he's talking about somebody else's masks, apparently. Or maybe nobody wants to admit that their masks were stolen. The French media have started calling the rush for equipment mask wars. The American 3M company, which makes the N95 mask, commonly known as a respirator, which provides better protection than ordinary surgical masks, said on Friday that the Trump administration had asked it to increase shipments to the U.S. from its factories overseas, and it had secured agreement from China to ship 10 million masks from 3M plants. But 3M said the administration had also told the company to stop exporting masks from U.S. production to Canada and Latin America. The company said the demand raises significant humanitarian implications, from stopping shipments intended for healthcare workers, and it warned it would backfire by triggering retaliation from other countries. I guess you're going to have to get started on that, guys. If that were to occur, and by the way, didn't we just hear for some strange, otherwise unexplained reason, at the time it was unexplained, that the Trump administration wanted to put troops on the Canadian border, and I don't know whether they were trying to disguise that as immigration control, but I don't know. I don't feel like we're in imminent danger of invasion by the Canadians, but maybe they should in a targeted strike, invade 3M. I don't want to advocate for that, but maybe they should do it. Let's see. So if that were to occur, we're continuing with the statement from 3M here. The net number of respirators being made available to the U.S. would actually decrease. That's how? I don't know. But again, we're talking about if we stopped sending things to other countries. One, it would create a humanitarian crisis, and it would decrease the number of respirators being made available to the U.S. Maybe it was other countries would just stop sending them, I guess. That is the opposite of what we have, and the administration... that is the opposite of what we and the administration, on behalf of the American people, both seek. Canada's Prime Minister, you know who he is, Justin Trudeau, said the U.S. move was a mistake. Not like, oops, but, it's a mistake for you to do this, I think. Noting that the U.S. also imports medical supplies from Canada. Yes, in the scramble for masks and other critical medical supplies, the U.S. has a significant advantage in its fleet of large air freighters, 3 times the size of China's. Buyers from national governments, U.S. states, and private buyers are going through a network of brokers, many in Shanghai. And we do have some a great new contact in the brokerage world who's feeding us good information here. And maybe we can figure out if we can get a handle on the story and get some specific questions that make sense. Perhaps we could prevail on him to use a bit of his time in answering these questions here on the air at some point in the near future. One broker, not the one we're talking to, Michael Crotty, C-R-O-T-T-Y, who runs Golden Pacific Fashion and Design in Shanghai, told the New York Times that Chinese factories sometimes move the highest-paying customers to the front of the line. It's a seller's market, Crotty said. You don't see this very often. Personal connections often provide a decisive edge. Robert Kraft, you remember him, when he's not seeking the help of Chinese-American service workers, let's say, in the Jupiter, Florida area. Robert Kraft, an American billionaire businessman and the owner of the New England Patriots, lent a Boeing 767 to the Massachusetts governor, Charlie Baker, who was trying to transport 1.2 million masks he had bought in China to Massachusetts. Again, following the president's instructions, you go get yourself some masks. Well, they had to send the Patriots team plane to go get this. The plane was one of 2 that Kraft bought for the New England Patriots NFL team, which helped organize the shipment with the help of China's consul general in New York, Huang Ping, who kept his office open over the weekend to process the documentation, according to an account on the Patriots website. The plane was allowed to land as long as the crew did not disembark, and it stayed on the ground in Shenzhen for less than 3 hours. The plane left with 3 minutes to spare. Very World War Z here. Speaking on Thursday in front of the plane, Baker choked up with emotion. This gear will make an enormous difference, the Republican said. It's not a secret that securing PPE has been an enormous challenge, and we will continue to come up with ways to chase more gear to keep our frontline workers and patients safe. We need more. We will always need more. U.S. states have found themselves competing against each other and the federal government for equipment, as we said. The New York governor, Andrew Cuomo, said this week that it was like being on eBay with 50 other states. State governors learned they could not rely on the rapidly depleting national stockpile, especially after Donald Trump made it clear that the federal help would be affected by political preference, saying he wanted governors to be appreciative. I've got to tell you that on 3 good orders, this isn't even Trump. I've got to tell you that 3 good orders we lost to the feds, Baker told Trump during a teleconference. I've got a feeling that if someone has the chance to sell to you and sell to me, I am going to lose on every one of those. Trump probably laughed at that too. Trump later said the federal government would attempt to drop bids if there was a conflict. We'll see whether they do that. The U.S. Federal Emergency Management Agency is coordinating flights for U.S. buyers, but has so far not nationalized the distribution network, arguing that private distributors can do a better job. Governments have been accused of using other underhanded methods to acquire supplies, including banning exports of protective equipment. I'm curious what this linked underhanded methods are. That's back to the article we were reading before about the U.S. hijacking equipment. I guess there were some other details in there that we may have missed. Brazil, too, has said recent attempts to purchase protective gear from China have fallen through. there is a problem of hyper-demand, the health minister, Luis Henrique Mandetta, said on Wednesday. The U.S. has the largest number of confirmed coronavirus cases of any country. This number now outdated, of course. Domestic stocks of masks and other vital equipment are scarce. That doesn't excuse any of it, but there you have it. Ricky the Canuckistani and Brian Monroe both weighing in. Brian Monroe saying, for the record, I'm unarmed. That's good to know. We'll be taking your masks then. And Ricky says, well, we could try to burn down the White House again. That is an option. And I'm not telling you that it's a good idea. I'm just saying I'm very busy and there's a stay-at-home order for me, so I won't be showing up to put the White House fire out with my garden hose anytime soon. But I look forward to reading what happens. Whatever it is, we'll see what happens, Not much I can tell you. That I can tell you. I can't tell you. That I can tell you. Is essentially what's happening here. Other quick updates before we part for the day. There's way too much, and we'll see if we can develop this storyline any further. The captain of the Teddy Roosevelt, Brett Crozier, who we were updated on the other day. New update, he has tested positive for the coronavirus. So bad news there, but at least he's on shore and hopefully getting some medical attention. That guy really may end up giving it all for his men, and the treatment he's gotten has been a real disgrace. Support the troops, everybody. Let's see. Some other really fantastic stories that I'll tease for tomorrow. Some amazing stories on the intersection of the coronavirus pandemic / panic and technology. Some of which we anticipated and some of which is a real surprise. So we'll try and squeeze information in about that one in the week to come. Tomorrow, of course, Tuesday, and time for Joan McCarter to join us in our 10 o'clock hour. But we also have an additional guest, Ian Reifowitz, going to join us once again for our first hour. So very busy day tomorrow. So we'll get to the technology stories perhaps Wednesday and after. More about the weirdness behind the White House obsession with hydroxychloroquine and what they're doing. And as I mentioned, I guess I can send you the word that's circulating on Twitter, though I don't have any actual linkable reporting. Maybe we can find it before the summary goes up about the Novartis connection. Novartis, I guess, is one of, I don't know how many companies manufacture this stuff, but Novartis, you might remember, also they came up in making a gigantic payment to the now imprisoned Michael Cohen back when he was trading off of his association with Donald Trump. Novartis, of course, a big contributor to the Trump campaign as well, but that doesn't necessarily stand out as unusual. But the Michael Cohen connection, I don't know if that's good name to trade on anymore, but it's out there, and I don't know whether that's, like I said, I don't know if that's really an active connection that you can use to get a good in with anything. The fact that they paid off Michael Cohen is probably of very little interest at this point to Donald Trump, unless that story is more complicated than we thought from the beginning. And, lots more too, and lots more even about Brett Crozier and the process by which he was dismissed. I'd love to update you on that. Crazy stories from all over the world at this point. I guess one more I'll include in the roundup, but in order to qualify it for the roundup, I'll talk about it here just for a second. New York Times piece from the weekend. It's bedlam in the mask market as profiteers out-hustle Good Samaritans. An important part here of the equation, and one that I think will get to the domestic component of the piracy that's going on, the capture and recapture, sale and resale of protective equipment by private profiteers in the middle of all this. Hospitals, governments, do-gooders, and hucksters are all competing. Scams and prices are soaring. That's Jack Nikas covering for the New York Times on, this would be April 3rd, on Friday. They were already onto this story, the domestic half of this. And I have a feeling when you put this all together, you're going to discover an enormous amount of corruption. Why, even more maybe than Hunter Biden and Ukraine all wrapped up in one. But apparently we're not going to. Although, maybe you can crack into the piracy game by looking at the price gouging side of things. Maybe that's the one good thing that this supposed new House special committee will be good for, even if it isn't looking back at why we were so unprepared and underprepared in the first place. In the meantime, time now to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. What's he got on his plate? Did you hear this one? A tiger at New York's Bronx Zoo has tested positive for coronavirus. I want to find out a little bit about that one. Defense Secretary Esper defended the firing of Crozier as a matter of holding leaders accountable when they issue warnings about a virus outbreak that makes Trump look bad. That's pretty amazing. Wouldn't it be interesting to start holding people accountable when they give bad information about a virus outbreak?
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
News from Ireland as well, where the Prime Minister has returned to medical practice to help in the coronavirus crisis there. And after arsonists torched several cell phone towers, the UK announced the 5G coronavirus conspiracy theory is dangerous, fake nonsense.